Hey, what's up guys, TechTine here, and I never really wanted to make this video. However, something intrigued me about this phone. So this is the Celero 5G Plus, and I did a video on the Celero 5G. Now, the biggest thing that made me really want to come back and do this video is the price drop that this phone received. So this phone was originally priced at $290, which I think was overpriced, but now it's at a more reasonable $150. So the first game that we're going to talk about is the design itself and the choices that they've made. And basically this phone has a similar design to the Celero 5, which still keeps that kind of a fake aluminum brushed feel on the back. And it does have a nice gradient to it. The top does have a triple camera setup and LED flash, which we'll talk about later on. But yeah, the camera has something also interesting. And the bottom also has the Celero 5G Plus logo. And this also has this kind of a cool gradient shift. Really nice finish. It gives it a good look. So the bottom has your known ports for a budget phone, your bottom facing speaker, USB-C, microphone, and a headphone jack. The right hand side does have the power and the volume up and down, and the power button does also double as a fingerprint sensor, which was fairly reliable for the most part. The buttons themselves are fairly tactile, much more tactile than the Celero 5G, so this gets a thumbs up from me on my end. Definitely an improvement. And yeah, overall, just a basic basic understanding of a phone. Nothing too crazy. The sides also have still retain that kind of a squared off finish for a much more and for a much better grip. But the phone is still hella slippery because of the back. It's very smooth, so a case is highly recommended. And this is at the end of the day a really large phone. And this brings me to my next point, which is the display. So because this is such a large phone, this phone does support a 7-inch 1080p display or 1080p plus display, however you want to say it. But yeah, it's slightly higher than 1080p. And as far as the resolution, it was actually fairly good. I mean, it wasn't crazy. I know it's like kind of a larger phone, so you would expect a higher resolution than 1080, but 1080p was more than fine in my opinion. It was hard to kind of pixel peep. The colors on it looked fine for an IPS panel. And yeah, so it still is a very kind of a reflective display. So that's something that I found interesting about it. But as far as resolution, I didn't really have a big problem with it. And the front facing camera has this kind of that hole punch centered camera. And one of the biggest display features, in my opinion, is the addition of a support for up to 120 hertz refresh rate. So you can turn that on and off, and it is variable. So not everything is going to support 120 hertz. And if you do switch it to 120 hertz, expect battery drop. So keep that in mind. But yeah, that really makes the experience that much smoother. So you do get 120 hertz when you're scrolling down content. If you're reading an article and you're scrolling down, you'll be able to feel it. If you're switching between apps, you'll be able to feel it. When you're watching content, not so much. When it comes to content consumption, this phone does well for itself. The biggest letdown in this display is the brightness. So it doesn't really get all that bright, which I found kind of disappointing. So that's also something that you need to keep in mind. At the end of the day, this is one of the things that I said I wouldn't pay $290 for this phone, but I would kind of consider it at 150 bucks. That makes it a little bit more competitive. So yeah, display overall gets a thumbs up from me. The biggest letdown is the fact that it's a dimmed down display, so not really good at brightness, but everything else seemed to be fine. As far as the camera itself, you do have a triple camera setup. Your main sensor is a high resolution 50 megapixel sensor. Now, obviously don't let those numbers fool you. Just because it's a 50 megapixel sensor doesn't mean it's going to produce the best pictures. And you also get a ultra wide as well as kind of a macro sensor. And it's either a macro sensor or a depth sensor. It doesn't matter either way. Kind of useless. Yeah. So basically, as far as camera quality itself, pictures were sharp, but the quality of the photos themselves were okay at best. Again, that's also another reason why I cannot get this phone for $290 if the camera is not at least average. And this was, to me personally, slightly under average, and I found a hard time with focusing in my experience. So the autofocus was on and off, but it's still a very usable camera for your basic things, and if you're in a well-lit situation, you won't be too disappointed. The camera app itself is kind of good, so it takes pictures very quickly. However, I don't know if the focus issue was from the sensor itself or from the camera app. Let's switch up the story and talk about the specs of this phone. So this phone does support a Qualcomm Snapdragon chip, and it does have 128 gigabytes of storage, standard storage, and a nicely sized 6 gigabytes of RAM. For $150, that sounds good to me. Combine that with 120 hertz refresh rate, so you're gonna have a smooth experience. And you also get a 5000 milliamp hour battery, and also does support fast charging. Now, the speed of this phone, it was good. So like I said, because you get 120 hertz, 6 gigabytes of RAM, and a Qualcomm Snapdragon mid processor, so it's not really the highest end, but it's not the lowest end either. It does support 5G, of course, and everything on it ran smoothly. It did hiccup from time to time, but nothing that was too outrageous, too excessive, where it felt like this experience is going to be obtrusive and not very good. So the performance experience was kind of average for $150. Now, if you push it and you download heavy demanding apps, it will kind of work, but it's going to give you a much harder time. So keep that in mind. Now, the biggest feature to me personally, and really what was intriguing about this phone, is the addition of a wireless charging. So for $150, I haven't seen a lot of budget phones that add that. So mainly on my channel, I review like the Galaxy A14 5G, didn't have wireless charging, and it is at a higher price. The A23, Galaxy A23 didn't have wireless charging, it is at a higher price. So the fact that this phone does support wireless charging, that was actually nice. I liked it. Now, as far as my conclusion when it comes to this phone, like I said in the Celero 5G review, this is kind of an advertisement phone, right? So the company that makes it is the same company that makes the Revel lineup, so the Revel 6 and the Revel 6 Pro. If you've seen those videos, if you haven't, I'll leave them linked in the description below. But just like the Celero 5G, this is the plus version of a kind of, in my opinion, a below mid-tier phone. What does that mean to the consumer? So if you're in the market for a Boost Mobile phone, because this is only exclusively made for Boost Mobile, I wouldn't brush this phone off. It has a lot of features going for it. Wireless charging, 6 gigabytes of RAM, 120 hertz refresh rate, a 5000 milliamp hour battery, a 50 megapixel camera. Not too bad of features for $150. And the service supposedly is better than the average phone on this specific network. With all this knowledge that you have about this phone now, would you make the purchase decision? Do you think that do you think that everything that this phone offers is enough for $150, or should it offer more? Is it kind of a stale as far as the design? Let me know in the comments. I'm really interested to hear your guys' thoughts, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Thank you for watching.